What's going on, everybody? Coach Atlas here, True Peak Training. Just wanted to take a few minutes today and go over everybody's favorite movement. A couple of points of performance we can cover. You know it. You love it. It's the deadlift. What I'm going to cover today are some techniques during the setup, some things to think about during the execution that will help with some of those higher rep ranges, or if you're really just trying to lift heavy and max out. So, a few things I want to cover in the setup. Shins, where they belong, where they should stay throughout this whole movement. When you set up your deadlift, your shin should start about an inch away from the bar. As you're standing straight up before you actually address the bar, you don't want your shins butting right up against it. The reason being, your shins are going to have a tendency to naturally move forward a little bit during the setup. If your shins are already against it, you're going to start to roll that bar away from you. Shins, let's get them about an inch away from the bar. It's a squeaky pen. Secondly, you want your shins to stay vertical through your setup. And what I mean by vertical shins is, as you're setting up and addressing that bar, what you don't want to have happen is your knees to drive too far forward and end up pushing the bar away from the body out over your toes. Shins should stay vertical. Next, hips. When you're setting up your deadlift, you should think about your hips traveling back in your setup as opposed to traveling down in your setup. The reason being, the further the hips travel down, the further forward the knees are going to go. Again, we're going to end up with those shins not being vertical anymore. Secondly, we're really trying to load the posterior chain for this movement. We're not trying to really load up the quads or anything like that. The lower the hips have a tendency to sink, the more we're going to load up the quads and sort of push the bar off the ground as opposed to pulling it like we want to in a deadlift. After that, let's talk about torso, shoulders. Torso and shoulders, where they belong. We want to make sure that we maintain a flat back and torso position. We don't want to see any rounding or any flexion during the setup, and especially during the execution of this movement. You want to think about having those shoulders pinned down and back. We don't want to have them up, shrugging like we're cold. We want those shoulders down and pinned back. We want to brace the core as well, fill all of those cavities in the torso with air, bear down all the way through the lower abdominals before we think about pulling that bar off the ground. So those are just a few things about the setup of a deadlift. Obviously, there's a bunch of other things we could get into, but what we just want to do is try to cover some of the basics, some of the bigger ones, maybe help improve a few of those positions. Now, when we're all set up, next thing we want to think about is execution, what we're looking for. When we go to lift the bar off the ground, we want to think about squeezing that bar off the ground with our body, not trying to pull or yank or jerk the bar off the ground. The moment you try to do that, you're going to get way out of position, back's probably going to round, you'll probably get that bar about 4 to 8 inches off the ground, then you're just going to get stuck. You want to keep that torso position correct, and you really want to think about squeezing that bar off the ground as fast as you can. While you're doing this, you want to think about falling back with the barbell. You don't want to think about lifting it straight up off the ground. You want to think about lifting it straight up and back. Your weight should shift from about midfoot to maybe rear of midfoot. You don't want to be way up, way back in the heels. Never want to be way out in the toes, but you want to think about shifting all of that weight with the barbell back as you go to lift. While we're doing that, we want to make sure that we're maintaining our back position as well. When we go to lift that bar off the ground, we want to make sure that we don't let the hips get too far ahead of the shoulders. We don't want to end up with our ass way up in the air, our shoulders way down by the bar, and then basically trying to do a reverse good morning, trying to stand that bar up. As we're squeezing that bar off the ground, our back position should remain the same. Related to that, we want to make sure that our shoulders don't round off at any point during this movement. When we stand a deadlift up, we shouldn't have to pin the shoulders back in the finish. As we stand, the shoulders should finish with the rest of the body. If you notice that you have to sort of roll your shoulders back or maybe pick your chest up at the end of your deadlift, chances are you probably let the shoulders go as soon as you went to go pull that bar off the ground. Well, these are just a few things to maybe help you with your deadlift. Once again, thank you for taking the time to check this out at Coach Atlas, True Peak Training. I'll see you guys on the floor.